Nickholas Doty is the founder and CEO of Artdrop, a tech startup that seeks to beautify the world by liberating art and empowering artists. In this conversation, we discuss the mission and vision of Artdrop, cutting-edge 3D scanning and printing technology that Artdrop uses to replicate art, the implications and impact of AI-generated art, blockchain technology and decentralization of art, and the influence of art on culture and society. I wish to be fully transparent about my incentives with this podcast. Even though I've only known Niko for a couple of years, I trust him like a brother, and I absolutely love this project. I've invested both time and capital into Artdrop and have high hopes for its potential impact on our society. You can check out Artdrop by visiting www.artdrop.me. This is True North Project, and I'm your host, Christian. In this project, it's equal parts sense-making, soul-searching, and storytelling. If you dig the vibe here, be sure to just subscribe on your platform of choice and visit truenorthproject.com to see what else we're up to. Also, recent revelation has confirmed that with each new subscriber, I get closer and closer to gaining admission to the celestial kingdom of Zion, where I will reign for eternity with innumerable wives and endless posterity. So smash subscribe so that I might smash in the afterlife. Ciao. All right, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
I've been wanting to talk to you on this platform, this podcast for a while, ever since shortly after we met, actually, because we met. I'm just going to tell the story real quick and try to recall it all. So I think we met in 2022 at a festival for a more beautiful world. It was called Arcadia in Las Vegas. And I felt at the time like it was a pretty strange and synchronous encounter. Just like friend of a friend, basically. Like I met this guy James, and he's just like, we talked for like 5 minutes, and he's like, "Oh, you need to talk to Niko," and I'm like, "Who the fuck's Niko?" And I know we're talking in a crowd, and swapping stories, and I'm like, wow, yeah, we're seeing a similar vision, and I really want to hear more. So that was the beginning, and then I don't even know if we exchanged contact info or not, but at the end of the festival, I was helping our friend Caitlin pack up her art, and we were leaving. And as we were walking out, carrying her art out to her truck, you were sitting out on the curb, and I'm like, as I was talking to her about the guy I had met and how he's got this crazy project and this really beautiful vision for art, and she needs to meet him. And then we walk out the gate, and you're sitting there, and I'm like, well, there he is. So it was an interesting and yeah, just curious way that we encountered each other. And ever since then, I've been wanting to. I mean, we've become friends, and our paths have sort of woven closer together, and I've been able to get more and more of this vision distilled, I think, in my own mind. And now I want to try to bring it into a digital artifact and kind of share it with this audience, whoever's tuning into this, and see where it goes. How's that sound?
Great. It's my first time.
Okay, sweet. Well, I'm sure this will be one of many, because I have a hunch that this project's going to flourish and flower into something really beautiful. So can you tell me the origin story, as much as you want to share, that of what led you into this scenario where you were now the fertile ground for the seed of Artdrop to grow?
The inception story. Wow. I mean, for me, this thing really started many years ago. I think it took for me a while for me to realize what it was. I had a background in working in the music industry, and I worked with a really amazing team that did amazing things in dance music for a long time, and left that, and started some other projects. And I was living in Laguna Beach, I think 2016, and I was introduced to this gentleman that used to be the shopkeeper for an art company called Mystic Arts, and I went on this rabbit hole with him. And long story short, I had exited a company and moved to Maui to had my kids, and taken some time off and do some healing and kind of figure out who I was. And um, I was doing some deep work over there, and at some point, I was, during the pandemic, some friends started to call me that were artists that were really struggling. And the theme was, is I got all this rad art and I'm locked up in my house, and how do I get exposure? And that's really where it stemmed from, was having a lot of these conversations. And it just became this reoccurring theme that I was supposed to build something new in the art industry. And um, later, I'd been doing some work out in the far side of Hawaii with a group, and next to a fire one night on a cliff in a Maloka, I had this just this vision of a company that we could build using the latest light and 3D printing technologies, and how we could help artists get exposure just using what's already exists in the everyday community, which is the antithesis of putting things in galleries and having to find it in institutions, locking it away. And I felt compelled after having these visions, and I got in my car on a 2 days later, and had flown to LA, and started driving and looking at art, looking at, talking to artists, and going throughout the community and looking at my process of discovering art and what that meant for me. And that eventually led to me creating a company a few months later, and going on a 3-year journey of art discovery and creation, and weaving a lot of beautiful relationships. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at now, and we're preparing for the launch of what this is to be.
Yeah, you've been like in this sort of gestation phase, and now it's time to birth this thing. And
Yeah,
I mean, at least that's what it looks like from where I'm sitting. Um, well, so anyone listening to this or who's familiar with this podcast knows that I'm not shy about talking or going anywhere. It's an open conversation, a platform where you talk about anything, including medicine, psychedelics. I've had a lot of conversations already on this podcast in that domain, including a couple of retreats I've been down to in Colombia, where I drank ayahuasca and vibed with other medicines of the Americas, San Pedro or Wachuma cactus, peyote, and talked about the benefits of those medicines. Like we've had Jesse and Bobby on the podcast with Eagle Condor Alliance, and they run a retreat center down in Colombia. So people are probably somewhat familiar. And you mentioned a Maloka, and I wanted to tease this out a little bit, because behind you on the wall is some visionary art. Looks
yeah,
like Martina Hoffman's work.
it is.
And are they both her pieces? Because the one on the right looks different.
No, that's a local artist here in Denver, where I'm at right now. It goes by Detour. I think his name's Thomas Evans,
All
and
right.
that we actually scanned with a drone, and it's a little side project that we're working on with him right now.
Yeah, he's a muralist, right? So like that's a
Yeah,
mural that you scanned and then with a drone and then turned it into a
yeah.
print. That's sick. So
Yeah, I mean,
anyway,
that guy inspires, so much
yeah,
brightness in communities. So I really love his work, and
yeah, it's
and
popping with
the
color. It's
feeling and the
beautiful.
emotion that he leaves around town is just epically beautiful, and he's a beautiful soul himself.
Yeah, awesome. So and then Martina's stuff, she's sharpened her teeth or whatever you say in the psychedelic space, right? Like I mean her art speaks of visionary experience and the psychedelic experience. And she's also, you know, I don't know, I guess been one of the forerunners of that sort of cultural movement. Or would you agree with that? Or how would you characterize her work?
Robert would call it, her partner, would call it fantastic realism. Um, that's morphed into what visionary art is. I think that was a mainstay of what she had, been working on for many years, but I think she just, depicts these interpersonal realms. I know she's not involved in psychedelics, at this time in her life, and is very, clean and but tapped into spirit. She's had, enough experiences there where, at some point you don't need it and you just kind of get it and you realize it's not the medicine, that it's the music, it's the vibrations, it's the frequency that we all hold. So,
Yeah, so I like that idea of like realism, like that what you're doing, say someone like Alex Gray or Martina Hoffman or whatever is painting something that maybe you experience on a journey, a visionary experience in a psychedelic state, but in that state you're seeing something that it's almost like the layers have been peeled back and you're looking into sort of like the fabric of reality or the substrate. You're seeing sort of the code. And so, um, and Amanda Sage does a great job of this too, where you're sort of like painting the grid, you're painting this sort of energetic field, and you're kind of showing this real aspect or this sort of subtle level of reality that you don't normally see. And if you're a normie walking around in 3D, you're probably like, what the fuck are these guys even talking about, right? Like, if I can't see it and touch it and feel it, it's not real, right? So anyways, small tangent on Martina's stuff, but the point I'm trying to get to is that um, a lot of this art has come out of the sort of psychedelic renaissance. Or, if you were to say what started it, it might be like Hoffman discovering LSD in the 50s, and then this sort of like things, dominoes falling from there. And guys like Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and Terence McKenna, and this sort of cultural wave. John Lilly was part of that, and so I'm just bringing that up because I know that this backstory comes from this. It's comes from the earth in some sense. Like, there's this lineage of this medicine lineage that I believe you were in contact with, and then there was sort of this current or this opening for this vision to come through. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit and see if you'd open to share that at all.
I'm gonna remain, I have my positions on psychedelics and culture, and yeah, bicycle day. But I think really it's about paying, you know, um, homage to the ancestors, and these technologies that were given to us long ago, and that might have been the first integration of it into culture, from an aspect. But I think, what what we're really doing is honoring our ancestors, honoring the land, honoring our spirit, with these technologies. I think it's much more than, as some people take it, as just, I'm eating these medicines and being healed. I think there's a lot of work and journey that needs to go with that, for
Yeah,
these things to actually, help people. So,
yeah.
and I see it more from a community basis, and,
Hmm.
from that it's not just about showing up and drinking. It's not, it's not the answer, but it does, lead you to the, you know, to the divine, and the grace that we can all be. So, and opens our eyes and allows us to vibrate these frequencies. But it's really in us to do that inner long journey, personal work, and build these communities.
Yeah, I think the word that comes up for me is integration. It's about like
Yeah.
maybe it does like rip you out of an old an old skin, like help you shed that skin,
Yeah.
but then you've got to like integrate and you've got to grow into the new skin. And to your point about community, the way that these medicines have been done for, you said, the ancestors have been passing these on for thousands of years. Well, they've been holding it inside of a cultural container. They've been holding it inside of a community container. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that yet in the West, right? Like we've got these pseudo containers and people's attempts at starting it, and so some are good, some aren't so good. So there's sort of a spectrum of like not all communities drinking ayahuasca are created equal, but I think
Definitely
that
not.
what's that?
Definitely not.
Yeah, and
Everybody's a shaman these days.
I know, right? So and we just basically take our current culture of spiritual materialism, ego, sort of one-upmanship, and just copy that onto, just use it. We're just basically plugging in a new medicine, and it's basically just the same game on steroids. So I think it's something really important to say about creating the right cultural container for these molecules, because it is a portal to the sacred, and they should be held as
Yeah.
sacred. So art can also be that. Art can also be a portal, right? And
Yeah.
not just a portal to the sacred, but a vision and a portal into new worlds, new realities, visions for, say, a more beautiful world. And this sort of
Yeah.
leads me into, the vision for Artdrop, right? And so, yeah, what was that vision that you had by the fire on the cliff?
Well, I mean, there was some real simple ideas, and a real basic one is um, everybody knows an artist they love to support everybody, and why are we not making that the easiest for communities to support art? And we have these mechanisms of scarcity and tucking things away and not sharing them, and exclusivity to art ownership. It's for the elite, is how it's always been. Um, and the vision was just creating a new mechanism that if we know that if we put these murals up in neighborhoods and a business comes in and that can transform the neighborhood, and another mural goes up and another business comes in, and we see that these technologies, the technology of art can really shift and uplift a community. Why aren't we building a factory to just do that everywhere? And I think that's what Artdrop is we're a factory that has the goals of using art to transform and beautify communities, liberate art, beautify the world.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. So it's so simple, right? Liberate art, beautify the world. Like that's a very, very simple thing to say. And then as you've probably, I'm sure, figured out, like it's a very, very non-simple thing to design and build and like figure out which way to go and where to start and how it's actually going to look. But there's
Yeah.
this idea that's coming up that I've heard kind of floating around in the regenerative space on the corners and fringes of the internet. And one guy who I've had on the podcast before, who I'm going to have on again shortly, Joe Brewer, who's doing a lot of regenerative work down in Colombia, and he travels around and does these sort of bioregional activations where his whole thing is about bioregionalism. In other words, we should be stewarding the earth as the earth's already walls and boundaries and borders don't mean anything compared to the watersheds, right? And the way that the earth's already sort of organized itself. So this idea, though, that Joe promotes of composting capitalism or composting our current civilization. In other words, if our current civilization is, this sort of overgrown kind of monolith, this kind of obviously unsustainable, obviously not very beautiful. Like there's a lot of things that are glaringly obviously wrong with the way that we do civilization now, and I see it front and center. I'm here in Las Vegas, where it's like sort of the poster child of all those problems. And so this idea that you could actually take what exists, right, currently, and you can compost it and make it into something better. You could beautify it. You could make it regenerative, right? And this is the sort of idea that's coming up for me when you're talking about art and coming into, like, say, a blighted neighborhood and then filling it full of art, and all of a sudden it becomes a hub of culture, and it becomes a hub of activity and relationships and community. So this factory 2.0, or what's the new sort of business model, or you called it a factory. So it's like, what's the new manufacturing of, say, a more beautiful world, and how could we have a business model and an actual orientation that takes the current shit show, the thing that we're in now, and actually makes it regenerative and beautiful. So how do you see the so in other words, the alternative, just to finish teeing that up, the alternative would be, yeah, maybe you have this like cool idea, but then it sort of just gets captured by the same force that captured Facebook and the same force that captures these other corporations. And it turns into another race to the bottom, right? Where we end up with the profaning of all of art. And it's just, it's this materialistic thing, and it just turns into another cash grab or whatever, what have you. So how do you see, economics and the business model playing into this, and basically making so that vision is actually realized, and the factory doesn't just become another extractive, like, thing that extracts value, say, from the artists and from the communities?
Well, I mean, at the core of it all, it starts with the artists and building tools that they need to get the exposure that they need, and that's a common thing. You have broke artists that can't afford to even get the exposure or make the prints they need. You have a layer up that it's still struggling, wanting to pay their bills, and then you have this upper echelon of art. So. I think it's just creating a system that has transparency throughout the process, and that you make that system so that they're really just focused on the creation process and building the tools that they need to do things like archiving, ordering art, how to track their distribution on where their art is, their agreements, and helping them maintain the leverage that they need with their own art, so that they can participate throughout the life cycle of their art. Not just, I made this original, I've sold it to John over here, he owns it, I own the copyright. At this point, I've got this thing I don't really know what to do with, and that's usually the case with most artists. They're so busy creating. Do they really have time for social media? Do they have time for going to the local coffee shop and hanging their art up? And do they even have a mechanism that's easy for people to connect with? And a lot of times the common thing, is I use Instagram, and the common call that I get now is Instagram isn't working for me anymore. So, and they can't afford to cut through the noise there. So,
yeah, and Instagram's captured by those race to the bottom dynamics, right? Like, Instagram's all about, you get audience capture. Basically, you then start like making posts just for engagement, rather than from a place of being an artist and being authentic.
called a hamster wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
They're
brutal.
stuck in a hamster wheel.
Yeah, and it leads.
So I think it's really just helping artists get in front of people and laying down a foundation of tools that protect them. So, and protect their art, protect their rights, and ways when their rights are broken, that they have the tools they need to actually do something about it. And mostly, especially like the age of AI right now, where all of this Midjourney and all of these platforms are trained on other people's data. And yeah, people are making cool stuff, and but it's all plagiarism. In my eyes. So,
Well, let's
just the tools aren't there to do anything about it. So,
right,
yeah.
but let's talk about that, the tech side of this, because this is really,
Mhm.
I see what you're building as a tech company, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a technology company, and we could talk about all the different types of technology involved because there's a lot. Like, it's this weird bridge
Yeah.
between physical to digital, right? And so you're
Yeah.
talking about, if we're talking about the structures, just on an abstract level, you're talking about, the physical structure of the art that gets created by the artist, that gets then portaled or beamed up into by a machine into a digital structure that can then be hopefully verified via some sort of blockchain or some other structure to say this is for sure this artist's work, and we can license it, and we can make sure that it, proof of authenticity, proof of ownership, that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
then a marketplace structure of some kind, so like a connectivity, some sort of social network, maybe, of like people being able to actually show their work and then be supported by their followers or supporters, their fans. Like, all of these different, aspects, it gets so complex as soon as you start. Like, well, you go from like, let's build some tools for artists. Like, what do artists need? And then all of a sudden it's a whole fucking ecosystem, and you're like, holy shit. So it's a
But much needed and worth the effort, I would say. So I
100%.
think,
Yeah. 100%.
yeah,
So, but let's
yeah,
talk about, the challenge there with AI, because what I see here is, I could see, like, playing devil's advocate, I could see someone saying, if you don't want AI to steal artists' work and to be plagiarizing it, then don't scan everyone's art, because that's just going to give it a ton more images to then train on, right? And then you're just going to have more of the problem. So my question is, how do you navigate or approach that problem of making sure that in the world of AI and in deep fakes and in all those types of things, that you can take, someone's digital artifact or their digital representation of their intellectual property or whatever you want to call it, and actually make so that there's a, you know, proof of that's protected in some sense.
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges there. I don't think not scanning the work or not scanning the world is an option at this point. I think that's pretty inevitable with where we're going on the path of AI. It's pretty inevitable that only the top echelon is going to be able to afford the, GPUs that are needed to run these networks. So it's really going to take the power out of the hands of the people at some level. So, and I think that's pretty inevitable unless we fight back a little bit. Um, but I think there's just some basic stances we can take initially, which is helping artists archive their work, but not just the archive. Once that's done, they need the tools to easily submit their copyrights. I know so many big collections that I've talked to. Nobody submitted their copyrights. They just don't know how to do that part. I think there's some amazing new tools being built. I recently saw the University of Chicago on some AI shading, and there's some new tools for turning the bots off so that your sites should not be scanned. Doesn't mean that malicious actors cannot get around things like that. But just a really basic framework of tools that are already out there, but putting them into an easy made package for artists to use is really the goal, without uh, saying all the tools that we're building. But yeah, just I think the basis of it is copyright and being able to do our best to shade those works from AIs, and that when it does happen and that we do get everything tokenized, that we have a way to track usage and create a system for right sharing is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I agree. And there's two big layers here in my mind. One is the substrate, whether that's a blockchain or whatever, like the thing you're talking about, and then there's the AI as well, because, like, it's not all bad, right? Like, everything's technology is a double-edged thing, and so there's definitely a way in which AI could be in service to a community of, especially of artists, right? And so, how do
Yeah.
you see AI working into the vision of Artdrop in, say, more of the beneficial sense or protopian sense?
Yeah, I mean, our company's focused on 100% human-made art. We're not helping AR artists or AI artists, I should say. Um, and forgot where I was going with that.
Well,
You
like
re-asked that
other
question again.
tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with AI
Yeah,
tools.
I mean, what we do is we focus on humans that are making art with their hands, and we use AI to assist them in getting more exposure. Is that portion of our technologies, which is just real simple, you know, things with giving them easy tools to create content and get their message out there. Um, using AI for helping them get exposure.
Hmm.
So to sell more human-made art, I would say.
Yeah. So there's this obvious tension, which is the gray area between using tools to make art, but then what point does that turn into AI art, right? Like where because for example, right, like my sister she's an artist, she's a painter, and she's painted
Mm-hmm.
some really cool stuff. It's like by hand, right? She's painting, but she's
Mm-hmm.
creating images that are source material for her to paint off of, right? And in the past,
Mm-hmm.
she's used Photoshop and she's sort of stitched things together, and she's used that as her source. Now with AI tools, she can generate and create way higher resolution sources, right? And so with a combination of a couple of tools, I mean, even if you want to just go only one tool and just use, say, Midjourney, that would still be a really powerful resource. But then you could, throw that into Photoshop or whatever, and then you can kind of, adjust it as needed. And the point I'm making is that she can create a digital piece of her art first, right? And it's all, it's very heavily influenced by AI in this case, and then go and paint that on a wall or on a canvas. And so my question is like, how do you tease that apart? Because then you could go and scan her painting, right? And it's going to be different than the digital source. It's going to have been then painted, and it'll have her own creative energy in there. But I would argue that the creative source or the digital source had her creativity in there as well. So it's this gray area that's tricky, because you want to value you don't want this art form to just be lost, and like, you want to value human creativity in all of its forms, including the physical mediums. But
Yeah.
at what point do you say, no, we're rejecting that art because that's AI art and not human
Um,
art?
if you did, I mean, my personal stance is focused on humans making art with their hands, and that's kind of where I've drawn my personal line. In the people that I want to help. So I that art that she may have created herself or scanned and then edited with AI, it's art been trained on every other artist really, and it lacks her just personal connection, for me at least, to the divine and this pure creative source that is just her, and it is my opinions.
Hmm. So, but wouldn't you? I mean, I'm going to push back on this because this is an interesting question. It's not just about artists and paintings. It's about the creative process in general. Like, is there
Mm-hmm.
such a thing as an original thought, right? Like, is everything that you create, including your company that you're working on now, including, whatever you've created in the past, wasn't it all influenced by your experience? Wasn't it all influenced by the things that you were inspired by and that you were paying attention to, right? So, all of the mentors that you looked up to and the books that you've read and the other companies that you look up to, those are all influencing how you build your company, right? So it's influencing your creative process. And I would make the case that, like, even if she doesn't use the AI tools, what she creates is sort of quote unquote plagiarism. She's stealing all of this inspiration from the world. And it's not stealing because nature is abundant. It's just like, it's just how the creative process works. Like, I went out this morning to do some yard work, and we have all these little palm tree startups that just happening. Like they're just growing on their own, right? Even in the desert, like
Mm-hmm.
this desolate place, so to speak, it's got all this new life just emerging on its own. And I'm like transplanting them, putting them where we want them. And I'm like, damn, even in Vegas, even in the desert, nature is just free. It's just abundant. It's like, here it is, right? And I feel like that's the same with art in human creativity. It's like, it's just everywhere. It's like, here it is. And the idea that you have to create like a walled garden and you can't go out there because that's not yours or something, seems like not the point.
And I'm not saying you can't do that. I think that's abundant. I'm saying that my personal position on who I want to help
Mm-hmm.
is, the people that are making things with their hands and these connections to source. Now, where they got that data, where they got that picture, that came to their mind is from, their own personal experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
AI is not just their own personal experiences. It's the vastness of human experiences in a way that's instantly filterable by what the user is seeking.
Right. And I'm all I'm trying to say is that I feel like it's less of a binary black white thing, and it's more of a spectrum. Because, for example,
Mm-hmm.
she can go in with a vision, right? Like, I want
Mm-hmm.
to create this scene of this transformational process of these 3 panels, right? And each one has its
Yep.
own vibe, right? And then she goes into her source making process, right? And
Yep.
uses maybe Midjourney or AI to help her create the vision and bring it to life. But she had the vision in the beginning. And so she's bringing a vision to life with the extension of the tools available, which you're right. Midjourney is giving you access to some sort of conglomeration of human creativity, which is really bizarre and wild and in some sense revolutionary. And then she's bringing, so it's like Balaji talks about this idea of bundling and unbundling, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like we had the creativity bundled, and it was siloed in garages, like all the artists' work was just in their garage and shit, right? And then the internet happened, and then AI happened, and it got unbundled, and now it's everywhere, and anyone can access it at their fingertips. And you're actually helping unbundle art. You're liberating it. You're making it accessible to people all around the world. And then it's getting bundled back up again because now the artist who has access to all of that creative energy then brings it back down onto her canvas again, right? So it's this sort of regurgitation, and we see this with music from a record or a track on a CD to a internet of endless songs back down to a playlist of all my favorite songs in one spot. So like I feel like that's kind of what's going on is AI sort of helping unbundle it, and then artists are going to go and they're going to have access to this. I don't think there's any way for you to look at a painting before you scan it and be like, no, you used AI on the source for this. You know what I mean? Like, people, they're still going to create art from the AI art, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be unique, and it's going to be their own. So I think that it's going to be really tricky. It's going to be a interesting thing that you're going to have to navigate, trying to figure out how to deal with the AI revolution in the age of, being in the industry of art.
Yeah, I think right now it's just bringing those that are making things with their hands and this direct connection from their experiences and their connection to whatever divine source is guiding them, liberating them from the physicality of this just one piece that can only be seen in one place at one time in the right moment. Right. And that's the confines, and that's what the contemporary artist is up against right now is how do I get more exposure when I'm limited to just this one item, and well, a print just doesn't do me justice, right? And it's not the same as the original painting. So how can we create that same experience that you have with an original painting with something that many can own?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what are you doing? What's the process? How does the tech work to like liberate a painting? In other words, somebody's spent months or a year on this, masterpiece on this canvas, and they put their heart and soul and creative energy into it, and it's this beautiful living thing. And then you want to, in some sense, liberate that, democratize that, make that more accessible to the world, rather than it just, like you said, hanging up in some elite mansion or a gallery someplace for the wealthy. How do you do that? What is the process?
I mean, we're using light technology here in our studios in Denver, LA, and Minneapolis. And essentially what we do is we turn light into code. And we have these massive scanners that are, 7 foot wide and 8 feet tall. And what we do is we take built inside of these devices, there's 8 lights, and there's 4 inner lights and 4 outer lights. And what we do is we take 10 passes over a piece of art, turning off and on a different light on each pass, which allows us to create 360 degrees of pure light and pure shadow, right? In the format that we're doing that. And then we're using some algorithms to measure that and into point clouds, and then taking that data and slicing it the same as what a satellite is doing for topography of land. We're doing with paintings, and we're doing it in such a precise manner that when we print these paintings, that they maintain the original resemblance of the original painting. So that if you were to take the original and the print that we've made with using these light technologies and hang them on the wall, likely you probably can't choose which painting is the original.
Yeah, this is basically, to someone, I mean, we're almost desensitized by like technology and how magical it is nowadays, but this is not separate from magic. This is indistinguishable from magic to anyone, like even now, but like in the pre-modern age, this is bizarre, because what you just described is basically this magical spell where I can just take this unique thing and all of a sudden replicate it in a way that you can't make a distinction, right? Like you can't tell the difference mostly. I mean, maybe if you're really like tuned into, art connoisseur, or you're the artist themselves, then you can kind of see a color.
It's not perfect. I would call it 80%, but it's a good representation that I would want to own. And I'm not a fan of buying a print of an original painting personally. So.
Yeah, it's got enough of the spirit of the piece for sure that it feels like you've got a painting on your wall, 100%.
That's correct.
Yeah, like I've seen, some of the samples that you've printed, and yeah, it's like, who painted that? Like it doesn't look like you printed it. It looks like someone painted it for sure. And it's pretty bizarre. It's pretty awesome. So you've basically just described.
It's uncanny.
It's uncanny. Yeah.
We're teleporting art with light.
Art with light. That's literally what it is. It's bizarre. So you're basically using this scanner, and I'm just trying to dumb it down for myself.
Turning light into code.
Yeah, you're scanning a piece, and you're hitting it with all these different angles of different types of light, so that it can create basically a map. So it's scanning it and creating a digital map of what the piece is with light. And then you have a print file that you can then beam down back into the physical world with a printer, which is a different piece of technology that's even bigger. And that thing is just like laying down all these different layers of ink and like building it up in these texture maps and all this kind of crazy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild.
You explained it perfectly.
Wild. So basically from now, like this is the revolution. I can scan a painting in Los Angeles, and then now it's in the cloud. Now it's in digital, right? And now you can or beam that painting anywhere in the world with a printer. You just print it out because you have a file, right? And now you can liberate the art. It can now be in any gallery, any household, any whatever across the world. And if you build the infrastructure properly, that artist will be rewarded every single time that artist printed, right? And instead of it being just like lost to some capitalist billionaire.
they can monetize the copyrights of the original works that they've created or previously sold, and we'll work with them. We'll work with their collectors on helping them, participate in the life cycle of their copyrights and their works and their popularity.
This is a beautiful vision, and because you're talking about beautifying the world, like covering the world in art, and then B. And because what I mean by that, let me just tease that apart a little bit, because it's also, we didn't talk about this yet, but it's reducing the barrier to entry for people who want art, right? Because buying that original painting, There's one of one. So it's like 10 grand or it's 50 grand or whatever, if it's good. So it's like now you're like, fuck, I can't afford art, but I want art, right? And so to liberate the art, to scan it into digital, now you've got this sort of opportunity for me, which is just like, I'm a normie. It's like, I just want to buy $500 or $1,500 art. You know, I can't afford 15 grand. So it's like, now I have access to Martina Hoffman and these like crazy visionary artists and this awesome stuff. That's like, the one of ones are super expensive, right? Like her work's very high value. So, and Benoza, and you've got like some amazing.
Well, they don't even sell it. You couldn't buy her work,
right?
Because she doesn't sell it.
Yeah, because it's got a personal connection. And this is there's so many layers to this, man. It's like, I'm glad we're doing this podcast because it takes a longer conversation to tease it all apart. You're talking about, like, I'm going to try to bring it into like one sentence. Now an artist can focus on creating just painting or creating their art. They get to keep the original. They get to liberate that original and make as many prints as they choose. And then people, their fans, their people that want to support them and that love their art, can now be collectors of their art at a price point that is reasonable.
That's what we're hoping to do. We got some work to do on the price points, but and we're really gunning and shooting to bring those down. But we're really creating a new opportunity for people to own art, and as this technology and our systems evolve, we're kind of in that Tesla Roadster model right now where you can't own the original, but you can own a $1,500, $2,000 replica of that original is where we're at with the goals of bringing those price points down for artists in general, just for the opportunity for them to actually be able to make a living from their works.
So
and that's really the goal, is to put more money back in the artists' pockets and create a transparent spread where they can, work with different organizations. We like to work with charities and pair that with art right now, or venues, and create opportunities, for everybody to participate in the sharing of these works.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, it's like, seems like pretty much par for the course for a tech sort of product where you're going to have to start out with prototypes, going to be hard to build, and your initial stuff's going to be like, you don't have the economy of scale behind you yet, so it's going to be more expensive, right? And so it makes more sense to focus on maybe like higher quality, sort of more niche stuff that some people are going to be really stoked about. But then you're going to make a transition most likely into more of a broad scale audience when you've got the infrastructure built and the economy of scale behind you, and that'll drive the cost of purchasing art way down. Depending on the art and the artist, right? Like, you'll still have artists who want to...
I don't want to say, I wouldn't say drive the cost of purchasing the art way down. I would say drive the cost for creating the art for the artists way down, and allowing the art to have the potential value that is needed in the margins that artists need to operate and be able to pay for the marketing and the resources that they need. So, but I'm definitely not trying to devalue the art, but definitely give access and tools to more artists in a mechanism that they can actually afford to participate, and that there's some equality and level playing fields between an artist that's just getting started off and having that same quality of an artist that's a master and been doing this for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, and there's obviously market forces, and so basically that price of the art is going to be in some sense determined by market forces. And one of the forces is the cost of production, which is what you're trying to drive down eventually once you hit the sort of economy of scales phase. Obviously, with the bigger the piece and that kind of stuff, it gets more expensive. So there's physical costs, and there's materials involved, but then there's a supply and demand, side of this as well. And is the artist really well known? And how many prints are they going to let be printed? Are they limiting that?
Look, I know just in this neighborhood that I'm in right now, there's, a suspected, 45,000 new apartments going up. I think, you know, in the US alone, I think there's 1.9 million new residences. So, you know, from, you know, studies that we've seen, you know, every home has art in it. It's synonymous with, you know, you know,
Like television or something.
think yeah, every home has, right? Like it's, you know, you likely have at least one piece of art in every room. So I think you know, what we want to do is make it so that it's cost effective to serve that market from, you know, all fine artists versus some marketing company at TJ Maxx that's just reproducing the same thing at scale,
Yeah.
right? But being able to, you know, have that same offering that they might have on scale on the same piece that a million homes have in it, but offering more variety at those price points.
Yeah, I love this this avenue, this thread, because basically how I see this is like localization. So if you're thinking about in terms of, say, supply chains and an economy, you know, a global economy with long stretched out supply chains is very complicated and it's inherently fragile, right? And then you end up with these massive box stores like Walmart who come in and they wipe out all the mom and pop shops and stuff because they've just got like these same generic products mass scaled everywhere, and then just like, you know, it gentrifies and it erodes the uniqueness and creativity of a local community. And so what I see Artdrop doing is sort of localizing it, where you've got, you know, sure, I
That's
can
correct.
buy an Alex Gray painting or whatever, and I'm not in New York, but still I'm going to be probably seeing an algorithm that's upregulating local art as well, you know, and showing me like what's going on in my scene, in my neighborhood, in my art district, like that kind of thing too. So it's ideally, hopefully, creating a proliferation of like uniqueness, and it sounds kind of paradoxical or contradictory in some sense though, because you're taking things and you're copying them or you're replicating them, right? And so I like the ultimate uniqueness would be one of one, you know, like where
Mhm.
there's no replicas, but that also has the problem of, well, now you have starving artists, right?
Yep. Yep. That maybe scarcity is the lie. Maybe that is the problem for them,
Say
and
more on
that's the
that.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's just, you know, that's the message that's been fed to artists that that scarcity is what drives the value of their art. And well, I'm not so sure about that with a lot of the conversations that I've had. And yeah, I can definitely bring the value up, but I think you can look this from the aspect of books, and is a book that gives you all of these technologies and learnings, is the original, you know, manuscript of that book worth less because more people have gotten to participate in the goodness of what it's created in the world?
Yeah, of
So
course
I
not. And
think
in fact, that's, you would argue,
I don't think art is any different,
yeah.
for the most part, in
So
my personal opinion.
it's one of these things where, as like, as the adoption curve goes up, and more people
Hmm.
are aware of it, more people. So especially if there's some, in some sense, a meme behind it, right? Because
Right.
art oftentimes is has a message, or there's a meme there. There's some sort of energy behind the
Yeah.
piece that you sort of understand when you see it, right? Other than just
Well, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I could.
yeah.
Sorry. I mean, there's
Other than just being like wowed by the beauty of it, you can also get like an idea that comes through. And so my point is you're democratizing that. You're spreading the meme, right? In the same way that like the Bible spread the meme everywhere. It's the most printed book, right? So like to your point, it makes, you know, Bibles more the meme of the Bible, and the we'll call it the superstructure of the Bible is actually now grown, and it's this ubiquitous thing. And yeah, if you found the first ever, like the oldest handwritten scribed Bible or whatever from 1,000, 2,000 years ago, it'd probably be worth a lot. But that doesn't mean, but it's worth a lot because the Bible's so ubiquitous, right?
yeah. I mean, the difference between a piece you buy at one of these big box stores and everybody's got hanging on their wall is really the stories. And I think at the end of the day, even with all of these technologies that we have access to, it's really about helping artists share their stories. And that when somebody comes into your home and you have this piece of art, there's typically a connection between the owner and a love for that art. There's that story. And then additionally, there's the story of why the artist or what inspired them to create this piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's part of the tech company. Another layer of it. It's marrying the story with the
What's
art.
the core of it? The core of it is helping artists
Tell their story.
share and tell their stories.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you see that playing out? Somebody makes their painting. They have maybe this really magical sort of backstory to it, this vision that they had, etc. And now they want that story to live with their art as it maybe proliferates, maybe it gets popular and it spreads. So how do you keep the story with the art?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. We're working on that. It's easy for contemporary artists. When you come in to one of our locations, we don't just scan your art, but we're gonna mic you up and have a conversation about that piece of art, and then we're gonna help you craft that into, words for the artists, and then we'll take those digital representations of the story and the piece of art and mirror those together, so they can live together on in a database forever. We're thinking that we'll likely do that on blockchain, but that's to be determined. We've been experimenting with both. Is the basic idea. And then I have artists like Robert Venosa, who unfortunately passed back in around 2011. And we're going through his collections right now that the world needs to see, and I'm having to chase down those stories, and what happens to these stories when the artists disappear is really the core of it, and just creating a system to keep them, protect art and the stories for posterity and for future generations to learn from.
Yeah. Walk me through from the user experience side. Let's say I'm a art enthusiast, or I'm just whatever. Maybe I'm not even that into art, but I get inspired by a piece of art that I see. I'm like, it stops me in my tracks. I'm like, whoa, what the fuck is that over there? And I go check it out, and it's like this ultra realistic, beautiful painting. And then, how do I interact with it? Like, what is the experience on the user side?
Well, for art that you're talking about art that we've distributed out in the community,
Correct. Yeah.
or we're
So
working on it with an event,
we've
or
talked about
a building or a location. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about the artist
I mean,
experience, right? The artist brings in their work, it gets scanned, then it can be uploaded into the
yeah.
cloud and printed, and they capture their story while they get the scanning done. What happens when the art's distributed? And let's talk about how you want to distribute it, and then like what the experience of someone interacting with it would be.
I mean, the idea is once we understand the art and the artists, that we can find the right locations with the right people for exposure for them. And we'll using these technologies to bring the value down, or value up, so that we can take 10 pieces of art and put that out into the world. And we're using some NFC and some blockchain technologies with those to authenticate those works and to provide easy access to artists. And you just see a piece you love, you tap it, you catch the artist's story, and you have the opportunity to connect with these artists and support them and buy their works.
So basically, living with the painting is like you would normally see a little plaque or something, and
Yep.
it's tappable. You just tap it with your...
just like you see. Yeah, like the NFC business cards. We've just taken that idea and flipped it around for artists and made tappable gallery tags that are connected to the archives that we've created for them.
Yeah, which is beautiful. So now, an artist, because I see this like once you see the vision, you're like, oh my God, this is so ready to happen. Because you look around to all the art and you're like, fuck, it sucks. Like, not that the art sucks, but like the system sucks. Like the way for me to engage with that art and support that artist and even know who the artist is just not really there most of the time, unless you're in like a formal gallery. Like usually you're just seeing like, there's a disconnect. And so what you're doing is you're creating the bridge once again between physical and you're using the digital space to bridge the artist directly to the wall that person is tapping, right? Like the painting hanging there.
Yep. I mean, essentially, we just looked at the whole art ecosystem and laid out all the ingredients of everything you could possibly do and narrowed that down to the functions that were purely important from that we were hearing in our artist interviews, which is I need exposure, I need exposure, I need exposure, and I need an easy way to do that. And that's the common theme with every artist that I've talked to.
Yeah. So, all right. So you've taken a struggling artist. You've taken, I mean, who's got probably amazing work, but no one's seeing it, right? And then you've liberated that by scanning the art. You created this digital map of it. You've uploaded that digital scan into an online database archive gallery, and then now you've created some replicas, you've printed them back into physical around the world, wherever they need to go to get exposure. And so high traffic locations and places where that art's going to resonate with people, that style of art. And then humans are interacting with it. They're tapping it. They're getting the story that was captured that's living with the painting, and then interacting with it, potentially just purchasing replicas that are going to get drop shipped right to them because they can just be printed on demand. So there's no inventory that's being stored up in a warehouse. It's just like print on demand when people want it, right? So have I missed anything? Does that sound pretty much like the...
Sounds pretty much it. I mean, it's an evolving ecosystem. Is we're running a lot of experiments and helping a few artists right now to build out the tools so that we can help more artists at scale.
And there's one final like layer to this, which I think is probably further down the roadmap, and it seems like a bigger, harder thing to pull off. But talk to me about proof of support.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've come from, doing events and e-commerce and looking at these social systems that, or these algorithms that are controlling what the community supports. And I think the idea is just to flip that around. And we're using some blockchain technologies to tokenize people's support. So it's finite with soulbound tokens, and you can loan those tokens to creators. And when you loan your support to creators, you are actively participating financially in their success. And that's the idea in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a nice tight little nutshell because there's so many cool implications from this, in my opinion. So like, just to speak it back, like the way I understand it, you could just give everyone who joins the network, the blockchain network, which would be anyone who purchases art, right, receives say 100 soulbound support tokens, right? So everyone has the same number and they're non-transferable, and there's not a marketplace for these. You can't sell them. And so there's no economic value in that sense. And then these these represent 100% of your support, right? And then you can stake the tokens on artists that you want to support, right? So you get to basically allocate and prove your support. And what this does is it creates an organic sort of distributed collective mind of some kind that then upregulates the art that the collective wants to see, right? And
yeah, it's a collective based filter at the end of it that pays the community for participating.
Yeah.
So, with so much creation happening, especially in the days of AI, and how Facebook and Instagram works, which is just this like, and there's no proof that you actually support these people. So just creating a mechanism where you had to actually know these people, you had to actually participated in their careers financially, and then allowing you to, stake in their careers and share at some level.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's more reciprocity. There's more of a win-win dynamic. I really like the win-win aspect of it. And if you look at like the Facebook example, Facebook's the fucking only one winning, right? Like Facebook is harvesting your attention and then selling it off to advertisers. Whereas what you're talking about is you're actually incentivized to, in other words, you're rewarded for putting your attention on an artist, taking your support tokens and supporting an artist. You're now exposed to the upside of that artist, so to speak. Like if that artist's work is selling, then there's a support pool or there's some sort of like kickback where every time revenue is coming into that artist, the people supporting that artist are making a cut because they're the reason, or part of the reason, that that artist is getting exposure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you like something on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, you're upvoting something in some sense. You're giving it your signal, you're giving it your support, you're giving it your attention, and you don't get anything back from that other than more fucking ads.
That's correct. So, yeah, and we'll use no ads with this system, and it just gives us a real immutable mechanism to understand what the community supports, and it can also act as a validator of transactions and authenticity for the works that are being replicated and put out into the world. And
yeah.
Given us a mechanism for tracking that and understanding how these representations are being used.
I love it, man. It feels like to me, the vibe of regenerative economics is the vibe, right? It's like it's sequestering the value inside the ecosystem, inside the community, instead of like having it run off to some just like hedge fund somewhere, you know what I mean? Or some like billionaire or whatever.
That's correct.
Like basically you want when value is created, which is really artists making art, right? And then economic value is created when that art is exchanged in a marketplace and printed and shipped to people, right? When all that value is created, what happens to the value? Well, it's getting sequestered back into the ecosystem, back into the artists, and then back into the people who are the art lovers, the people who are supporting the artists, right? The community. So yeah, there's this really cool synergy.
The real question is if you remove the value of from the tokens, from the coins, where does the value go? What is the utility?
Yeah.
And that's what we're really interested in. So if the coins have no value, but your wallet still grows, it's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, basically,
you're based on merit.
Yeah, and you're creating. It's really just kind of not necessarily creating value out of thin air, but it's
no. There's still market.
Yeah.
There's still people creating things, and there's still people supporting things. And to me, support is I exchanged value with you, not just said I like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could be, I traded something, or I gave you money, or I gave you an apple, I gave you an orange, but there was some form of creation on both sides being shared.
Yeah. So, one of the obvious things that's maybe a downstream effect of this, or another one of the potential implications is, okay, so you figured out what you just said, right? Like, how do these tokens have utility outside of just the monetary value, right? These support tokens, these soul-bound support tokens that everyone has 100 of, so to speak. So, okay, now we've proven, let's say you're 10 years down the line, 5-10 years down the line, this community has grown, it's thriving, there's beautiful art hanging up all over the world. Artists are, a lot of artists are thriving that never would have been discovered. And you've got this sort of proof of concept, it's done, it's ready. Like, is there another phase? In other words, okay, you basically got the infrastructure for distributed governance. You got the infrastructure for everyone on this network to allocate their support in more ways than just supporting artists. Like they could be doing some sort of collective shared mind in some sense. Like if you can figure out the coordination of that, my question is, have you thought about that? And what do you think about the potential implications of basically just a distributed intelligence, distributed organization?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's, getting humans to agree on something has always been the hardest challenge. And I think just having an immutable way for us to cast votes is really important. I think what we're seeing happening in the Web3 spheres are really driving some pretty unique ideas on mutability and how to actually govern. There's a lot of challenges with that still, but I think we're as we evolve, I think we got a lot of smart minds figuring out how we can all participate and live our dreams together on this planet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is a big kind of philosophical question too, because now you're talking about what's the best way to do governance, and it's just like this rabbit hole.
No. I don't know. I can just do my part and if the world accepts it, then that's really amazing.
Yeah, I just have this like kind of romantic idea of, you know, we'll say like company 2.0 or something like that, like the next generation of corporations or of institutions where they aren't just owned and captured by a market where, you know, there's this weird sort of maximization of shareholders' interests and it's all just about making money and it erodes and extracts value from the planet. And ultimately it's a race to the bottom, right? Like if Coca-Cola just keeps doing Coca-Cola and McDonald's keeps doing that and Walmart keeps doing that, then we end up at this fucking kind of dystopia. So, you know, this idea that you could have an exit or a public offering where you're not, you know, the public going public 2.0 would be like open sourcing it to the community where now the people who love it, like the artists, the art lovers, you know, the galleries, like the people who are actually inside that ecosystem and who care about it are the ones who own it, right? And it's this sort of direct kind of cooperative decentralized DAO ownership or something. It's kind of like an abstract thing and it's obviously incredibly technical and complicated, but if you can keep the value there and then keep the direct governance of those people who are the stakeholders, you know, instead of having it being outsourced to some exec team who's got like all of the stock, you know, and then they just get to like make choices that maximize them and fuck everyone else, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's what Web3 is bringing, is that immutable clarity on companies and how we exist and where things are going and how things are actually being used. And you know, these big companies, I think, just forgot that we're here to benefit the lives of the public. And I think we're as a company just holding that intention that what we do is here to be in value to the community that supports us, especially starting with the foundation of the artists, and that we're doing things with the direct intention and holding those intentions that we're here to just make the world a better place for our families and our children.
Yeah.
So, and it's not that we want to predict the future; it's we want to project the future.
Yes, and I want to let's segue into that because we've talked, you know, the technology, we've talked the infrastructure, we've talked, you know, about the financial model. So let's talk about distribution. So basically, growth and marketing, and this idea of art as marketing instead of actually running like ads, but just actually just putting the beauty out into the world instead. And then what
Yeah.
is the implications or the downstream effects on culture? And talk to me about myths, memes, and metaphors.
I love this topic, but you know, uh, I think art is this noise that surrounds us, and whether that's through poetry or music, it's um, the product of our current environment. So if we kind of, you know, can identify these things, which some have, and that there's pillars to what makes culture, which is the art and the music, and under that there's you've got the influencers that are creating it, and then under them you have the worldviews that are you know, influencing them to create, and the worldviews which are being kind of populated by the myths, the memes, the metaphors, the underbelly of what the communities are actually talking about. So I think just using and looking at that model and going, well, if we know where we are now within these pillars of humanity that make up culture, why can't we, you know, reach into the future and create art that is the future that we all want to hold, and surround ourselves with that abundance and create those myths and memes and metaphors so we can affect the worldviews and use the influencers to, you know, project the futures on our walls that we want to come true.
Yeah. So basically, art as the tip of the spear of culture, like the evolution of culture. And the
Yeah.
idea
I think it's the most potent medium that we've seen over the years for driving change.
yeah, 100%.
Right?
I mean,
whether you look at the 60s or many revolutions, it's all starting with art and artists and their memes.
yeah, I mean,
So if we know that, then let's share the memes,
yeah,
and let's filter those memes as a community.
yeah, 100%. Like first consciously and intentionally just realize that just the awareness and the realization that this is the substrate of our psychology, of our collective psychology, which would be our culture, right? So if your collective mind or your collective psychology and culture is rooted in language, it's rooted in story. And we've always been storytellers, since we've been gathering around the fire for hundreds of thousands of years telling stories. Like basically these stories are the substrate of our what we value, what we then do, what kind of companies we have, how do we view the environment, do we hold water as sacred, do we protect the water, what kind of values do we have around family and those types of things. That's all rooted down in this sort of cultural level of story. And you're saying that like with an artist sort of, and Alex Gray talks about the sort of sacred artist, or the idea that an artist is kind of performing a sacred act by being able to channel this sort of vision from some sort of beyond down into the physical realm, the physical plane. And you're saying like, hey, why don't we orient to this more beautiful world? Why don't we imagine the more beautiful world that we want to create together, and then paint that, and like, let's bring that art into the world, those stories into the world, those metaphors and memes into the world, right? And let's seed that future.
Yeah, let's understand how these technologies affect us, and that we do project our own futures. We don't predict them. So, and I'm doing the same thing with art.
Yeah, liberation of art for a more beautiful world, man. Fucking love it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful vision, and love to see. It's been a journey. It's been a ride. I mean, I've only known you for coming up on 2 years, but so you were already a year into the journey when we met, but I've just seen it emerging. I've seen it evolving. I've seen you like, giving it your sweat and tears and blood and everything else, all the fluids. And it's
for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a wild ride, but I can see it starting to come alive. It's starting to blossom like that painting behind you, that mural behind you on the wall.
For sure. It's been a journey, but a beautiful one at that. And I've just been lucky and grateful that so many people have shown up to support these ideas, and that the artists support the ideas. And I just wake up every day and with that core focus of how do I support those around me and be in service to, creating a better, more beautiful world for my children and my families.
Yeah, man. It's a beautiful prayer.
That's all I can do.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Well, are there any other final thoughts or words? Anything else you want to say I haven't asked you about?
Don't think so, man. I think we're nice to talk with you.
Cool. Well, where can I point people to check out Artdrop?
Yeah, you can check us out on artdrop.me, and we're going to be launching in a specific genre right now, which is visionary art. That's not where we're going to be staying long term. Just building for me right now, and the things that I'm really passionate about and I want to see, and just helping some really beautiful artists, and then using that as our base for building the right tools so that we can create a system that works for every child that was born an artist is the goal.
Yeah. And as AI takes away all of our shitty jobs, we're probably going to have a bunch more artists coming up.
For sure. Let's make more art. I mean, there was a talk that you reminded me of just now that Terrence McKenna gave, and we'll end it on that note. But they asked how we save the world, and he said, put the art pedal to the metal is the only thing that's going to confuse all of the machines.
Beautiful.
This is the idea of what he said. Yeah.
Love it.
Well,
all right.
Thank you.
Much love. Bye, everybody.